And John Holman is following developments for us from Mexico City now. John, it's been a dramatic and fast-moving few hours. What's the latest you can tell us on this now?
Yeah, well, the latest, just to bring you up to date, is that the soldiers have left Plaza Murillo. That's the central government square in La Paz, in Bolivia, La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. And there's now images of President Luis Arce and his vice president at a balcony waving the Bolivian flag, also waving the Huipala flag, which is closely linked to the indigenous movement and with their own political party, MAS. And there's people, lots of people in the plaza below them that have gathered, and they're thanking their supporters, workers' organisations for averting what they say is a coup. And it really did seem like one. It was on dicey ground for a long time. All of this unfolded in about 3 hours. First of all, these armoured vehicles rolled into Plaza Murillo. Then this general, Juan Jose Zúñiga, which, as you said, was dismissed just the day before from the head of the armed forces, used one of the armed vehicles to basically batter down the palace, the governmental palace there, and then went in because he wasn't allowed in, local media are saying, to talk to the president. He then went in, discussed with him, came out, held an impromptu press conference where he said that he wanted to re-establish democracy in the country, that he wanted to free political prisoners, including opposition figures like Luis Fernando Camacho and the ex-president of the country, Janine Yanez. And so he was saying all of this while his troops had control of the plaza and weren't allowing anyone in. Meanwhile, Luis Arce spoke, asked for support, and also named new heads of the armed forces. And the new head of the armed forces basically ordered the soldiers back to their barracks and said that these soldiers that are in the plaza are staining the uniform of the country. So just as a very, very short-term reading of what's just happened, it seemed that the general, Juan Jose Zúñiga, basically didn't have a lot of support when he was doing this. Even Luis Fernando Camacho, one of the opposition figures that he claimed he was trying to release and speak through, in his Twitter account later appeared that he rejected this, that he didn't support this action from the general. And outside of the country as well, there was a lot of rejection from the region, Latin America, from the United States, from further afield, Spain. So the general has really gone out of the plaza. It seems a little bit in retreat, you could say, with the tail between his legs at the moment.
John, what was the political background to this then? Why have we come to this point?
I think that's a really interesting question, because even though for the moment it seemed that there won't be the armed forces taking over Bolivia and deciding to re-establish, as the general there said, to the democracy in the country, this is still a city that's and a country that's very combustible, that's had a lot of problems. The MAS party, which the president, Luis Arce, belongs to, has been in power since 2005, with just a small window of interruption between 2019 and 20. That's a long amount of time. And though at first, especially under Evo Morales, there were a lot of reforms, it gave a lot of money, it gave a lot of help to people that were struggling in poverty. Now there's been a lot of economic difficulties in Bolivia. There's been a lot of rejection. There's been tensions within the party itself, Luis Arce and Evo Morales. And so all of this is really coming to a head, and it's not going to go away just because this apparent coup attempt seems to have ended for now.
John Holman, thanks very much indeed for that. Well, there's been political infighting within Bolivia's governing party for years. In 2019, Evo Morales ran unconstitutionally for a fourth term in a vote marred by violent protests and allegations of fraud. After lacking support from the army, Morales fled the country. After 12 months of an opposition-led interim government, Morales' chosen successor, Luis Arce, won the presidency. But Bolivians have faced a deepening economic crisis during his term. Well, seeing an opportunity, Morales declared he would run again in the 2025 election. That's despite a court ruling barring him from doing so. Discontent over the ruling MAS party runs high within the army. General Juan Jose Zúñiga had openly expressed disapproval of Morales' plans to run again. And the government, trying to keep the military in check, summoned Zúñiga to the presidential palace and dismissed him just a day prior to the coup. Well, Thomas Becker is an attorney and an activist who has spent decades working on human rights issues in Bolivia. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the programme. So what do you make of what's happened? Is this still a dangerous situation for Bolivia?
Certainly. So thank you for the invitation. The situation hasn't changed much. For the moment, I think Luis Arce has calmed the waters, as they may say in Spanish. But I think a lot of the conditions that existed before today's attempted coup still exist. There is a right wing in Bolivia that has carried out multiple coups. I mean, Bolivia's had more coups than any country in the history of the world, 191 coups in roughly 200 years. So this is nothing new. And the same forces that carried out a coup in 2019 in Bolivia attempted to carry out one in 2020 and are still involved with the generals and military in many ways. And so I think the same conditions of a very discontented right wing still exist.
Given what you say then, is there likely to be some kind of backlash from the government now?
I don't think so. You know, uniquely, I think the international community moved quickly on this. And you know, the images of the very traditional type coup in which, you know, military vehicles are quite literally ramming the palace didn't go over well. I think from the center, left, and right, the international community has condemned what the military did. And so I think the Luis Arce government's in a pretty good situation, a relatively good situation internationally. I don't think that they're going to respond with repression. They've replaced the generals and named new generals. And I think this has pacified the country for the time being. But I do want to emphasize that there still is a right wing that is quite angry and still wants to take power as they did in 2019.
Yes, you say pacify the country there. I mean, can Luis Arce rely on the people to prevent any kind of military takeover, as it were? Or does he face issues there too?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned earlier in the program, Bolivia's going in an economic crisis in many ways. There's bad inflation. There's infighting in the party. So I think his support that he had when he won in 2020 isn't quite as strong. But he won in 2020. He doubled the second place candidate. So he won with an absolute majority and does have quite a bit of popular support, at least more support, I think, than the military would have in carrying out a traditional coup as they attempted today. Historically, it has not gone well in Bolivia in coups, and I don't think that the social movements, the popular movements, and the unions will accept a coup.
Thomas Becker, thanks very much indeed for joining us.